Namaste and welcome to this Thursday 10 p.m. show, which is going to be in English, as you know. And today we have a gathering of some very eminent people with me. I think somebody's echo coming. Yeah, please. And of course, as always, we have Vibhuti Jha ji on the Thursday 10 p.m. show. And today I have Dr. Bhaskar Kamble. He is a theoretical physicist and data scientist, and he has written a wonderful book. It is called The Imperishable Seed. And this imperishable seed actually talks about how Hindu mathematics changed the world and why this history was erased. So let me welcome Shri Bhaskar Kamble and the man who published the book, Sankrant Sanu, and Shri Vibhuti Jha. Welcome all of you to this Thursday 10 p.m. show. Dr. Kamble, we
And
know, of
why
course,
this
and we've been talking
today?
about this that Indian mathematics and the sciences associated with mathematics. Of course, there can be no science without mathematics. So we keep wondering how Europe was actually dealing in science without knowing even the basic numerals. So you say that you have the evidence, and this book actually brings forth the evidence. I have glanced through it, not fully read it. So, would you like to tell us what kind of evidence you would like to adduce? First of all, uh, why is mathematics important, and why Europe did not have it?
So, yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. And could you just explain evidence for which concrete thing? The evidence for the
Oh well,
existence of
you
mathematics
have
in India or the
mentioned
transmission? Yeah.
mathematics and the transmission, and you talked about the Pascal's triangle, Fibonacci sequence, Rolle's theorem, Taylor series, all
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
But of course, we
Yeah.
know that even the Pythagoras theorem and other things, even the basic numerals, we know that
Yeah.
the Europeans did not have the decimal system.
Hmm.
And without the decimal system, how were they conducting their sciences when they say that Europe is the land which led in the sciences?
Yeah, this is actually a very, very good question. I like this question because for we keep hearing of Greek mathematics, like Euclid, then Archimedes, then Ptolemy, all these people. And Ptolemy is supposed to be an astronomer also. Like for astronomy, you need to have a lot of calculations. You need to make a lot of calculations for astronomy. So all these sine tables and everything. So in the absence of that, how can you do that? So that is actually a very good question, and that actually brings us to a very interesting point of the narrative of Greek mathematics, which I would like to talk about this at some point in the show, in this show. But the whole narrative in today's world is that the subject of mathematics is a European creation. It first comes from the ancient Greeks, and then it was taken up further by the modern day Europeans during the Renaissance. And somewhere we do hear a little bit about like some maybe like Al-Khwarizmi or some other people, but Indian mathematicians, they hardly get a mention in this kind of a narrative. So this is of course a very in the popular historical narratives. This is the story that is prevalent. But this is when you dig deeper into the history, one comes across a lot of evidence that this is actually not the case. Well, I mean, historians, they know about all these things, but only that it has been somehow suppressed in the modern world. Actually, not just the modern world, but also the previous centuries. So I mean, the evidence is like there. I mean, phenomenal. For example, Al-Khwarizmi's book. He got hold of the works of Brahmagupta and Aryabhatta, which he used in his basically yeah he translated into Persian, so to speak, his version of it. And then his book referred to the numbers of India. And then like people like Fibonacci, he in the 12th century, he introduced the numbers, the Hindu numbers, to Europe, and he also called them the numbers from India. And and then and then there is things like the number system, and then you have the whole thing, the whole concept of algebra. In fact, arithmetic and algebra, they are very closely related, as I also mentioned in my book. So because algebra is like a generalized version of arithmetic. The arithmetic belongs to the realm of the, so to speak, the vyakta, the manifest, and algebra belongs to the realm of the avyakta, where the symbols, they refer to the avyakta. And in fact, this is very deeply connected to the Hindu philosophy of vyakta and avyakta. So these are the aspects of the Brahman, the supreme reality. Then yeah, I mean, and then but also in algebra we see the tendency that algebra is attributed to Europeans, some Greeks like Diophantus, or later on Al-Khwarizmi. And it is just because, for one thing, Europeans, they were not aware of when the first translations came. Maybe they were not aware that this comes from India, so they thought it's an Arabic creation. But then later on, with the rise of colonialism, with the rise of basically with the rise of religious supremacy, then colonialism, and these racist ideas, the references to Hindu mathematics became less and less. And in fact, I had a very funny experience. Like, I had in the IIT Kanpur alumnus group, I had posted about my book, and the book, of course, has the title, "How Hindu Mathematics Changed the World and Why This History Was Erased." And suddenly there were some people who made some ruckus that, how come you call it Hindu? They had a lot of issue with that. And we see that also in today's world, this tendency to suppress anything positive with the word Hindu. I mean, the same people will be fine with words like Hindu terror or Hindu right wing, but if you associate something positive, that becomes a problem. So these are things. Yeah. Sorry.
I know that we know that the Shilva Sutras have a lot of these formulations, including the Pythagoras theorem, what is called the Pythagoras theorem. And there they used to have this system of using the string to do measurements, and that's how they were able to compute complex numbers. We also know that we had this decimal system for any number of any number of thousands of years, and you can see those numbers given even in text like Mahabharata. Whereas the Greco-Roman system of numerals, it is difficult to even add. Say, if you have to add something like 68 plus 78, maybe you'll have to use an abacus, or you have to do something else. And we also know that even in the middle centuries, the Indian numerals were not trusted. Not only not trusted, there was, I think, the city of Florence in Rome, who actually, their merchant guild actually banned the Indian numerals. And we also know that we have the Surya Siddhanta. We also know that we have uh, all these astronomical treatises that go back thousands and thousands of years, probably tens of thousands of years. So, with all that evidence, how did they manage to erase this evidence?
Um, I think, yeah, that is in fact a very, very, very tricky question. Like, on the one hand, it seems obvious that, we as Indians with our heritage, we have been living with this for generations. It's there in our generational knowledge memory, but still in the outside world, it's just not there. So I think, um, so to this, I guess, my explanation is that, today the world is actually ruled by, basically the Christian worldview, in which, in fact, the church took over, the mind, so to speak. The church, and imposed its ideology on the entire world. And this, in fact, and also the other, related religion to Christianity is Islam. So it has also a similar psychology, or a similar ideology. And then there is a sort of, and then comes the, things like colonialism and all those. So and those this associated biases, and the racial biases which came in between. And then because of the power equation, it became really easy to impose a certain kind of history on the world. I mean, this is actually not so far fetched. I mean, if you this is like, all the governments have been doing that, of course. Like, the USSR did that. It did propaganda. It brainwashed, millions of people. If you read the book 1984 by George Orwell, there also the same thing is done. You can actually brainwash millions of people. It's not all that far fetched, but yeah. So this is how, I guess these are some of the things which come into
I
my
know.
mind.
Even Al
Yeah,
Khwarizmi, he calls his book Kitab al Hind. So at
yeah,
least he wasn't that dishonest,
yeah.
unlike these people who actually, I'm told that all this knowledge before the Jesuits took it to Europe, even before that, when they reconquered Spain and they had the Library of Toledo. And from there, they translated these books and then they attributed it to the Greeks because it would have been a great insult to the church if they had attributed it to India. So that's one of the stories. My question to Sankrant now, Sankrant, you published this book. Then what was the thought when you first got to learn about the book or you were first contacted
Well,
by it?
I ended up getting more involved in this book than I typically do for a book I publish. So all credit to Bhaskar for drawing me in. And as I started, we have so many submissions, so many manuscripts get submitted. Bhaskar had come from somebody who was already an author with us, so he had a very good referral into us. But as I started reading it, and also I was very interested in the subject, as I started reading it, there was so much. I thought I knew a little bit, but I realized there was so much I didn't know. And so I kept going deeper and deeper, and I started posing questions to Bhaskar, saying, okay, tell me about this. For instance, when he started writing about algebra, the chapter on algebra, it's like, don't tell, show me. How did they write equations? I want you to go find out how they actually wrote an equation in Sanskrit, and how did the Indians actually write equations. Come up with that. I want to put the exact Sanskrit of how the equation is written into the book. So it ended up being a collaborative effort where we went back and forth for about 2 years, Bhaskar,
Yeah, I
almost.
think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
a little
So
bit
it was
more
it,
even.
it was a 2 year work where we would wrestle with things, and to a lot of credit to Bhaskar for actually taking all of my questions very seriously. And also, I would send him on rat holes of research, and he would come back a month later saying, oh, I figured all this out, we can do this. So it was very exciting book to be part of, not only as a publisher but as an editor as well. And the other thing that struck me, just to make it simpler for people to understand what the big deal about this is. And the big deal about this is that a lot of times we only look at India as having invented zero. So what really, as you go deeper into it, we're not talking about just zero, but we're talking about the representation of numbers. So right now we write a number 3251. We know that's 3251. That means each of the place, each of those digits have a different significance, which is the place value notation. Europe didn't have anything like this. Europe had Roman numerals, and if you think what's the big deal of what India did, try to multiply this number 3251 by itself in Roman numerals,
Oh,
right?
just try to
That
add
is-
78 plus 68. Forget
yeah,
multiplication.
exactly. Right. So they had no method of computation. They had no method of arithmetic. All they had was an abacus where they would move beads around and do the calculation, but they didn't have any algorithms. Another word that gets invented from algorithmy actually, but they had no algorithms for computation, which means they couldn't really do any significant math, which means they couldn't really do any significant science. So this whole notion that Europeans, brought us math and science, and this is one of the ways that we got colonized, was that look how much advanced the Europeans were. They brought this math and science, and we backward Indians are learning it. In fact, the truth, as Bhaskar's book shows, is the exact opposite. Knowledge flowed from India either through the Arabs. It went to Europe, or it went through the Jesuits who came directly to Kerala because their calendar was all messed up, and so the Pope Gregory sent the Jesuits to Kerala to figure out the Hindu calendar, because the Hindus were the only ones who could figure out all this navigation, which is depending on the calendar. So from the Arabs, it goes to Europe. From the Jesuits, it goes to Europe, and then they start to erase the traces of it, and we see the explanations that major historians like James Mill, who writes literally the history of India, which becomes the Bible of the history of India, where all these people are quoting from it. All the IAS people study texts based on the when the ICS started. This is the way that people get to know India. And of course, James Mill is an out and out racist. His explanation of why he picks, why the Hindus didn't invent it versus the Greeks, for instance, is just that, oh, Hindus are a superstitious lot, and of course the Brahmins are fanciful, and they make up all these big numbers. They say that the date of the earth is even beyond what the Bible says, which is only 4,000, 6,000 years old, of course. So it is like all this Hindu knowledge is of course wrong, because it contradicts the Bible, and the Bible tells us the entire earth is 6,000 years old. And so this is the kind of explanation that these major historians use. And then all of the histories that we read even till this date in India are just piled on top of these histories that the Europeans wrote 150 years ago. So that's what I found really significant about Bhaskar's book. Is there are history, actually there's 2 or 3 points I want to make about it before I turn it back to him, which is, one aspect was the fact that this invention of mathematics, both from notions of zero to algebra, was very closely tied to Hindu philosophy. So all of these ideas, this is why the imperishable seed itself is a quote from the Gita. So the mathematics, and also mathematics was completely uh, part of all the other arts in India. It was not a separate bucket of science and art and math. The poets were some of the greatest mathematicians, because a lot of the binary system was invented for poetry. This is and later on, Charles Boole and Babbage credit India's or their knowledge of India for discoveries in the computing world. But so that's the most first significant thing, how the mathematics ties to Hindu philosophy. And I think Bhaskar's book is very unique in showing that. The second aspect was, a lot of times we talk about this is the mathematics, but we don't talk about the topic. Why was this erased? How was this erased? What was the motivation for erasing it? How did that happen? So I think that's also a very, very significant part of what the book says, is that it shows not only what existed, and it shows with painstaking detail. One of the things we did in this book was, we haven't hand waved anything. We go back to the original Sanskrit sources, we quote the text, we show the verse, we say this is how it was done. And then when we come to the histories and so on and so forth, we ask the question, why is it that we Indians even don't know? I went to IIT, I studied math. I had no idea that all of this had a relationship to India. We learn about all these mathematicians of Europe, and Rolle's theorem and Cantor and this and that. But at the end of it, it is a lot of white privilege, white supremacy that is really about making Europe the center of the world, and that's driven by the church, and that's how this erasure comes about.
Yeah, just this was really, really nicely put, Sankrant.
Lastly,
Yeah.
let me
Mhm.
ask you a leading question on this
Mm.
only. Yes, because it is basically, uh, they talk about mathematics, then they talk about Euclid and his axioms, and they make it so difficult that to use what is called formal maths, and you have to add 2 plus 2, then they require something like, I think 378 pages to make 2 plus 2, 1 is plus 1 equal to 2, or 2 plus 2 equal to 4. Whereas in India, it was a very simple, what is called a pratyaksha pramana in Indian pramana shastra or epistemology. Indians use ganit and and use the direct evidence, whereas these people complicated it, and they used what is called the evidence of the word, that is, everything has to come from the Bible, and that seems to have complicated mathematics more than anything else.
Yes, sure. This is, in fact, yeah. So, uh, yeah. So there are actually many many points in this statement. This is a very interesting statement, and um, so in Western mathematics, there is always this attempt to remove mathematics from the empirical. As C.K. Raju also has mentioned that very often. So and this stems from I think from this Christian notion that God cannot be, the so-called God is out there. He cannot, this God cannot be in this world. So this there is this this whereas mathematics should refer to something that is immortal, that is super, that is always right and all that. So it should be somehow like connected to this God. So and then so that's why then this attempt is made to remove it from the empirical. So like when you say 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, that is something which we see, but this seeing is related to this empirical thing. So it's like you want to try to remove it from that, but the problem is that you cannot remove it from the empirical world because it arose from the empirical. Okay, it arose from the empirical, so you cannot remove it. And then the other thing is that in India, like you have this, there is no such. Okay, so it's like from the Bhagavad Gita, for example, there are statements like Vasudevaha Sarvam, or else Sadasa Chaham Arjuna. That is like Vasudevaha Sarvam. Everything is Vasudeva. So in this, you don't have this like taboos against the empirical. So that sort of a thing is there, and right, and I think these are some of the things which yeah, and then which come to my mind when you talk about this. um, right, and that of course makes mathematics much more difficult. Oh yeah, and one more thing which I would like to add in this is that this separation from the empirical gave rise to this mathematical notion of proof, where everything is supposed to be axiomatic. And then what happens is that in the 20th century, even earlier actually, like with the rise of colonialism and with the this discipline of history of science came into being. So they remodeled all the texts of Greek texts like Euclid, Archimedes, so to speak, in a way which fits in with the the version of mathematics which they want to propagate as like the Western way of doing mathematics. So, so for example, if you look at the text of Euclid, Heiberg, he wrote the critical edition of Euclid sometime in the 20th century in Greek, and there he also makes this sort of he makes a selection of only certain manuscripts. So with Euclid, the problem is that Euclid, Archimedes, the problem is that there is all these manuscripts, they come from around the 5th century CE of the current era, whereas Euclid lived sometime in 300 BCE. So there's more than 800 years in between, and it has been edited by several other people like Theon or several other like mathematicians in between around that time, and also later by the Arabs. So you have a multiple number of manuscripts for the so-called Greek mathematicians, and he chose only those manuscripts and also edited them also in a way that reflects this mathematical notion of proof in this very final version. He presents him in this very final version, and then this notion of proof and this supposed cleanness of mathematics became in a way to invalidate other mathematical systems like the Indian system. So yeah, these are some of the things which I can which come to my mind with respect to this topic.
Right, yeah. I mean, that was quite evident the way it has been done. If our audience is wondering what we are talking about, we are talking about this book. This is called The Imperishable Seed, and written by Dr. Bhaskar Kamble, who is there right in front of us. And this talks about how Hindu mathematics changed the world and why this history was erased. Uh, uh, One very interesting other aspect is the transmission of calculus and how the West came to own calculus. And whereas we know that the sign tables are very much there, even with Aryabhat. Would you like to detail that out a little bit? First of all, for the layperson I'm talking about, we might all know it, but the layperson doesn't know why calculus is important. So could you just tell something like, in a brief manner, first of all, why calculus is important and how India is the one that invented calculus,
Yeah,
how
so I can
West
give you, yeah, right.
appropriated it,
Okay.
and how it contributed to their science and suppressed our science.
So you have a very popular channel, Jaipur Dialogue. So you have thousands of subscribers. So like they get recommendations
8
from
lakhs
on.
on today's count. Yes,
Yeah.
8
So
lakhs.
okay, this, yeah. So they get recommendations. So these recommendations are based on certain algorithms, and these algorithms are in turn based on like maximizing certain or minimizing certain functions, cost functions. So there itself you see the use of calculus in optimizing problems. For example, this is one thing which and then it's like everywhere, of course, in other cases, like when you consider astronomy, for example, and all other fields, economics, calculus is there in a very widespread, used in a very widespread way. um, and uh, and in fact, yeah. So the thing is, if you go back to the history of calculus, it's not the Kerala mathematicians who invented calculus only. I mean, it has a long history going back to the time of Aryabhatta. So he gave a table of sine, the sine function, in his Aryabhatiya, and with his notation, he gave us sine tables for 24 angles. Now the beauty of this table is that it is not just a list of sine values, but it's a second order sine differences. Second order sign differences, and in this he makes use of the discrete version of two mathematical results. One is that the second order derivative of the sine function is proportional to the sine itself, and in another, and this is actually a very beautiful verse in the Aryabhatiya, which I have described in my book. In the appendix I have given the full mathematical details, that this single verse has two meanings. One is this differential calculus idea of the second derivative of sine, and the other one is the so-called fundamental theorem of calculus. So it has two interpretations. So it's like a really beautiful verse here. And then he uses the discrete version of these results, of course. And in astronomy, Indian mathematicians were also astronomers, so they were interested in tracking the motion of the planets, of the sun, etc. So for that you need trigonometry. So for trigonometry, you need to have values of the sine or the cosine functions. You need to have accurate values of that, and for accurate values, you need to have also an accurate value of pi, circumference to diameter ratio. So so they came up with various schemes. Maybe they would increase the number of angles for which they would tabulate, or they would make interpolation formulas, and they would yeah. And so interpolation formula, Brahmagupta, for example, he gave a second order interpolation method, which is equivalent to the Newton Stirling approximation. And then Vateshwara, he gave a list of sign values to much high accuracy. And this was like long history of this development in this field. And then in Kerala, and then yeah, in North India, unfortunately the Islamic invasions happened, so basically the mathematics development, etc., stopped there, as Al-Biruni explicitly mentions. And but in Kerala, in the Vijayanagar Empire, this went on. So there you had the mathematicians like Madhava and his lineage, Madhava, Nilakantha, and Jeshtadeva, Parameshwara. So they carried this legacy of forward. Okay, and then they were interested in getting these values of the trigonometric functions, values of pi. And so in the process, they came up with these ideas, these concepts of this infinite series for the the sine function, for the inverse tangent function, cosine function, for pi, and a lot of other series things, and and things like like how the volume and area of a sphere, things like that, which we teach today in calculus courses. And at the same time, Europe was in search of the sea route for India, and Europe found that with the help of Vasco da Gama, who in turn found it from an Indian. So but unfortunately, or fortunately or unfortunately, they did not have any good navigation techniques, because even they were helped by this Indian guy, and he used navigation instruments for guiding them. And Vasco da Gama is known to have brought some of these instruments back. And uh, yeah, and so they wanted this mathematics information for the navigation. For navigation, you need knowledge of astronomy. And then so they were interested in this. And at the same time, the church was at the same time carrying out its reform, calendar reform. So Christoph Clavius was assigned as the head of the calendar reform, and he was a trained mathematician. He was a Jesuit priest, and he trained several Jesuit priests, and he sent them to India. Like Matteo Ricci is the most well known of these. They were all trained in mathematics from him, and yeah, they went to India, and then they are known to have, and the Jesuits are, they have sent Sanskrit texts. They were on the lookout for mathematical knowledge, and they sent this knowledge back to Europe. And then in Europe, all these mathematicians whom we know, like Galileo and all that, they were in close touch with the Jesuit sources, and then essentially. Essentially, this knowledge trickled down through like Galileo, Torricelli, Cavalieri, and all these people, Isaac Barrow, Newton, and Leibniz. Also, he was also in close touch with the Jesuits. There is a huge correspondence between him and the Jesuits. So, and yeah, so this was the basic history of the transmission of calculus. So I would also mention that the calendar reform then shortly took place after that, and there was a whole lot of activity in Europe from around the 17th century or so. So look at the timeline also. This Christoph Clavius sends the missionaries to India, and to Kerala, in fact, Cochin, which is the epicenter of the Kerala mathematics. And in a few decades after that, you have all this Galileo and all these people springing up, and all this mathematical results. Leibniz coming up with his a series for pi. Then you have all this Taylor series, and you have all this Gregory series, and you have this astronomical models like from Tycho Brahe. His model was the same as the one by Nilakantha. So yeah, I mean, I would also mention that this is like very, I mean, it's like extremely strong evidence that the calculus was not an original development in Europe out of nowhere.
I think this is
Yeah,
one of the things to emphasize, Sanjay ji, which is that there is as Bhaskar is saying, there is a series of events.
can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure, sure.
I have to request the viewers to please ask your questions, and also to please like the video. Yes, please carry on.
Absolutely. Like the video, ask your questions, and buy the book, The Imperishable Seed by Dr. Bhaskar Kamble.
Once again,
And
I would like to show you the book. Here is the book,
absolutely.
and we will put it in the description so that you can directly go
Wonderful.
to the buying link.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I wanted to just highlight this one aspect of what Bhaskar is saying, which is how there is a systematic plagiarism, and then so you copy something, and then you erase, you not only plagiarize the original, then you erase the origins, and then you go and tell the people that you are backward people and look how advanced we are. And this is how it happens systematically. All Indian children keep reading in our history books that how Vasco da Gama discovered a sea route to India. Of
Oh,
course, the
that's the
fact of the
doctrine of
matter is,
discovery. That's a
yeah,
scandal in
exactly.
itself.
Yeah,
That's
that's
a
a whole other
scandal in
topic,
itself.
Sanjay. We should go into. But the fact is that they're saying, oh, we Indians were so silly. We were just sitting there, and all these white people came and discovered all these things. They discovered the sea route to India. Of course, Vasco da Gama discovered nothing. All he did was he went down the coast of Africa, and from down the coast of Africa, he couldn't figure out how to get to India. So he found an Indian navigator, and he paid the guy, said, please show me how to get to India. So the navigator shows him the route. And of course, Indian navigation was so much advanced simply because its mathematics was advanced. Because navigation, especially in those times, there's no satellite, there's no GPS. So navigation would use the stars and would use tables, and you would see based on how high and low, in the sky a particular star is, where your position is based on a date. But if your calendar is wrong, then your navigation is wrong. So Europe was literally all over the map. They couldn't navigate to save their life, and this is why they needed to fix their calendar. So this is why they sent the Jesuit priests to India to fix their calendar. They get all this information from India. They erase the origins, because obviously we are savages and pagans, and savages and pagans cannot be more advanced than Christians. So they erase the origin, and suddenly mathematics starts flourishing in Europe. So, it's like if you drop a pebble in the water, even if you don't know that the pebble is in the water, you know that there are waves. So something must have dropped into the water. So what happens is you see the waves here of the knowledge that is brought from India, even though the original pebble dropping, the evidence of that is erased, right? So the question is, if all this mathematics suddenly comes up after the Jesuits come back from India, they should be able to show the previous 100 years of that mathematics in Europe that built this mathematic tradition that Europe claims for itself. And the fact is, they don't have it because this was the input that came from India and then they built on it. And the real tragedy is that after one of the other things that Bhaskar points out in his book, The Imperishable Seed, is that when the in the earlier phase, actually, there are some European mathematicians who still acknowledge the Indian origins and the advancement of Indian mathematics. But once India gets colonized by the British, then it's even more important for them to tell us how backward we are, because how will they convince us of our own slavery and the need for the superiority of the British to come and teach us science and math. And so science and math was very integral to our colonization. So setting this history right is equally important to decolonizing the Indian mind. And that's a very significant part of what Bhaskar has done.
May
Right,
I
right
add one
now.
point to this?
Let me
Can I
ask
add one point? Okay.
Vibhuti ji, who's sitting quiet all this while.
No, it is for me. It is a very fascinating conversation because, as we have talked on Jaipur Dialogue many times, that we are trying to awaken the woke, and so the important part here is that it appears that Bhaskarji, being as young as he looks, he is also one of the wokes who turned awakened with this research that he has done. So congratulations for that, and I want to.
That woke is a slur word.
He confesses it in his own statement that he realized that, oh my God, so many things are actually based on our texts, and that was stolen, plagiarized, as Sankranji said. The point here is
Oh,
very
he
simple.
even mentions the connection with para and apara vidya in the
Absolutely,
book.
absolutely. So the point is that I want to tell you two things here. You picked out the topic, the book Imperishable Seed, and that, as Sankranji was telling, that it has origins in Gita. But if you Google the word imperishable seed, you will see all biblical references to that. So this is very interesting. How did you choose this name? And what was the inspiration for choosing this name? And number two is the fact that, you know, so many things have been stolen from our text. We know that now. So it is you I congratulate you for doing this work, and I want to tell you this very simply, that I'm going to buy some of these books and give it to some of my American friends, because it's important for them to know that too. I mean, this is one thing that I can easily do, is to share it with my mainstream American friends that, hey, we Hindus are not what you think we are. We are actually who we are, and that's the narrative which is important. So share with us one thing that I wanted to ask you, and that is, how was the destruction of the our ancient texts being done and we did nothing about it? Were we in denial, or we were too much of a lotus eaters?
So I think there are two questions you asked, right? The first one
Yes.
was the origin of the imperishable seed and the biblical references. Yeah, so to be honest, I was not at all aware of that it has biblical references. Only later, when I was like googling the imperishable seed, and I kind of was surprised. Oh, it has so many biblical references. So I was a little bit surprised, and I was also a little bit struck by this pattern, because you see also this pattern in, I mean, like the church appropriating the knowledge. For example, when you look at the Greek knowledge, during the time of the Thomas Aquinas and everything, they appropriated the Greek knowledge and made the Greek heritage as their own heritage, the ancient Greek and the so-called pagan people. Okay, so and then of course you see this with the calculus, the Jesuit priests, taking calculus, appropriating calculus. This thing, this appropriation takes place through Christianity. And on the other hand, also in India, you have other kinds of appropriations. Like the churches are built in the form of temples to hoodwink Hindus, and the priests are dressed like Brahmins, and their songs are like, Yesu Sahasranam. This kind of appropriations we hear of is also going on. So I really had to think of these kind of appropriations when I saw this biblical reference to the imperishable seed. It was a little bit of an like a yeah unpleasant thing for me to see that. But I think, if we are on the right path, I think the imperishable seed will be known more for its reference to Bhagavad Gita than the, because in the Sanskrit it is called bijam avyayam, which refers to the imperishable seed, the avyay bij. And this has a very very close philosophical relation to the subject of algebra. And if you look at Bhaskara and um, Narayan Pandita, their definitions of algebra, it is really like a double meaning. One meaning is on the mathematical level, and the other meaning is on the metaphysical level, where they speak about avyakta and the vyakta. They speak about, from the avyakta comes out the vyakta. And it is similar to what we have in the Bhagavad Gita in some of the verses in chapter 9. Avyaktad vyaktayah, something like that. From the avyakt comes the vyakta. So this was one of the things which made me choose the name, the imperishable seed. And this would be the, I think. And your next question was, how come we did not do anything about this appropriation when these texts were being taken? Yeah, this again is a, mm, I think, because I think when the British were here, they were really, smart. I think I mean, they used very time-tested techniques of colonizing the mind. And they realized that, the Indians, if they know about their history, then it will be difficult to colonize them. Because, why would they want someone who are like second-hand copies, of whose knowledge is a second-hand copy of, their knowledge. So they had to hide this, the source of knowledge from the Indians, that you are, you are really, you had a heritage of knowledge. So they were quite successful in doing that. I mean, with the writing of histories like James Mill's history, which was in turn rooted in the Christian supremacy of yeah. And then they would also, one favorite ploy they used was choosing certain people to act as the intermediaries between them and the natives. And these people would convince the others of the superiority of the British, and the notions that, the Indians are superstitious. They are lost in superstition, and they are very backward. And one such famous name which comes to my mind is Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Of course, like, he was the classic Indian intellectual. And why do we even have to go so far back? We can even just look at today's world. I mean, you have all these intellectuals in India, not just in the world of journalism and media and politicians, but also, like, established university professors, even mathematics professors, like, yeah. I mean, they will never talk about things like, they won't have any problems with things like, the Pythagoras theorem, even though Pythagoras, there is no proof that he discovered this theorem or he proved this theorem. So we have to, like, really see it in this way, that somehow the mind of the Indians got broken, the spirit of the Indians got broken through centuries of, Islamic rule, and then through centuries of propaganda by colonialism. And then it is really an uphill task to come out of it. I mean, of course, we have to also take responsibility for this, to come out of it. And we have to do our bit to see that, this is reversed, this trend is reversed.
Right. One of the interesting things is when you're relating the philosophical underpinnings of Hindu mathematics, is a subchapter called Quantum Mechanics and the Hindu Concept of God. Would you like to elaborate that a little bit?
uh,
Once again, reminding the viewers, please do ask your questions.
Yeah, so this this is a very difficult point, in fact, because then I would have to give a bit of details about the Hindu philosophical
Please
tenets, or
do. We
yeah.
have all the time, all the chat for dialogues. That's the
Yeah.
beauty of this platform.
Uh, So in religions like Christianity and Islam, you have an external god who is out there somewhere. Okay, but in the Hindu philosophy, you don't have this god, so to speak. In like the Christian or the Islamic god, you have something like you have something like this supreme reality, which is given the name of Brahman. So, and this Brahman is in a way is the only reality that exists. Everything else that we see is like an appearance. So it belongs to the so this appearance, it is like a um, uh, it's basically called Maya. It's like you associate a certain reality with this ever changing world, and you think that this is real, but in a certain way, this ever changing world, everything that has beginning and end, like from the Bhagavad Gita, you have this verse, na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate
न
satah. So
भावो विद्यते सतः
so everything which has a,
नासते विद्यते भावो न भावो विद्यते सतः
so it's
That's-
the only thing that exists is this tattva. This tattva is the only thing which has an existence. The other things don't exist. But in a way, that is also a false statement, because if when you say that something doesn't exist, you give it a reality, that which the reality is not, which the tattva is not. So it has a multiple layers of meaning to this. So it's like the same reality becoming, appearing to be divided, and giving the appearance of multiplicity. And but this multiplicity is, in a way, an illusion. So this is also what Schrodinger says. So if you look at the same mountain peak from different places, from one place it's called Gauri Shankar, other place it's called something else, I don't remember. But it's a multiplicity which is an illusion. So it's like, and so your existence as a jivatma, you have a certain association with your body, with your family, with your life, with your being right now. So it's like a localized existence, and this is again like an appearance, because in truth, you are beyond that, because this appearance comes and goes, this existence comes and goes. So what is it that remains, that unchanged, that is the point of Hindu philosophy of, so this is like, it encapsulates different layers of meaning, and the same reality can be either, like, uh, it yeah, it's like, so Brahman, this Brahman, or this Paramatma, it has different aspects, like Vyakta and Avyakta, like we said. So, and these concepts of para and apara prakriti, and but they are the aspects of the same divinity. Okay, so which appears to be divided. So, and this was an aspect of Hindu philosophy which was radically different to the Christian, to the Christian worldview, in which each person is a unique person, he remains or she remains that person forever. And I, for example, will remain as Bhaskar forever, and when I die, I will either go to heaven or hell, but there also I will remain Bhaskar only. I will be known as by Bhaskar. So this is the sort of philosophy which you have in the Christian worldview. And uh, and then what happened is that, there was this flow of Sanskrit texts from India to the West, and so they became acquainted. The West became acquainted with Indian philosophy, and you have deep connections between the philosophy of Schopenhauer and the Upanishads, and for example, and then like Sanskrit texts were taught in all across the universities in Europe, and people like Schrodinger, Heisenberg, they were exposed to these Sanskrit texts. And um, and then there is this certain, and then this Hindu philosophy of the nature of reality is, in a way, then mm, is compatible with the quantum nature of reality, because in quantum mechanics also you have multiple descriptions for the same thing. So for example, in quantum mechanics, you have a particle, which can behave like a wave. So electron was thought to be a particle, but then after the so they saw that it shows diffraction effects, and then it turned out that you have to describe it using a wave function for electron, and conversely also for light was thought to be a wave. So but then there were these experiments, I don't remember the names of the experiments, but then the photoelectric effect, I think, yeah. And then it turned out that even light had to be ascribed a particle behavior, like the photon, which is called. And then this was a huge mm, stumbling block for the Western philosophy, because how can you do that? But it was in fact actually, it's actually totally compatible with Indian philosophy. So these are some of the things that, I mean, is really, I find it really difficult right now to describe this properly, but because it's a bit tricky to talk about these things. But roughly speaking, this would be the explanation. I hope it has been useful.
Maybe your next book will be about that. If you're having a difficulty talking, maybe you will write the book about that.
I'm sure
Actually,
I have written it better in my book than I have talked about it right here.
at the best of times, it's not easy to describe quantum physics because the idea of superposition is intelligible only to those who have some kind of a schooling in Advaita Vedanta. And both Schrodinger and Heisenberg were accomplished Vedantins also. And that was probably one of the reasons why they could figure that out. So I think there are very few questions. So we leave the task of asking some tough questions to Vibhuti ji.
No, this, as you said very correctly, that you have to have the knowledge to ask a question. But I'm driven by a teaching that I received from my teacher. You ask questions. You don't ask questions only after you have understood everything or you didn't get anything. So in my question is based on total ignorance, and it's mostly driven by political element of that. Yes, we have, Indians are known to be very.
You've crunched numbers for a living, so I
I
think you can
did.
ask.
I did. I mean, we studied under Professor Dandekar in the quantitative methods in economics. Was the first time my batch was introduced to that in the college, and we knew very little about it. But important part here is very simple. It's again, I go back to the thought process. The thought process is that we as a people will have to now study these books, the Imperishable Seed, the all so many books that have come about, and we have to begin to create an actionable platform. So Bhaskarji, how would we create an actionable platform based on what people will read from your book? What is the actionable agenda that you will share with all the audiences that are listening to us today?
I think this has to be a joint effort. So I am already working. Sankranchi and I have discussed some ideas together on this, and I think Sankranchi also has some plans along this direction. Um, yeah, I think Sankranchi, maybe you can answer this question,
Absolutely,
Sankrant.
yeah.
You have.
I think the main agenda is really about decolonizing the Indian mind, and this is the root cause of so many of our problems. There was this, I think, Australian academic who was saying that Indian intellectuals go all around the world attacking India. It's a very rare thing, and one of the reasons this is happening is because the whole colonial education has kind of pitted Indians against Indian culture as the root of our problems. There's this laundry list of, sati, dowry, caste, all this, and this is what is ascribed to India.
The atrocity literature.
Atrocity literature, right? And that's how it's defined not only for outsiders but also for Indians. So the jada of the problem, the root of the problem, is actually in Bharat. तो हमको क्या करना है कि भारतवासियों को पहले मुक्त करना है, ये जो उपनिवेशिक जो द होल colonial mind that is caught. And this is why I love Bhaskar's book, because you can give it to your most secular friend as long as they're open minded. You can give it to a mathematician, you can give it to a scientist, and they will come out of it transformed, because it is completely evidence based. We have not done any exaggeration. Nothing has been said where it's not supported, by multiple pieces of evidence. And so the agenda, if you are asking Vibhuti ji, is really how do we create a movement that helps to decolonize the Indian mind, where we are building on our own knowledge systems rather than just willy nilly importing these social sciences and other things that really don't they're neither social nor scientific. and so how do we actually create a system where we have a generation of Indians which is now finally rooted in our own knowledge systems, and then they're representing us to the world and telling the world about our wisdom rather than going around the world and bashing us.
That's right.
One more observation, of course, is that is Dr. Kamble a bit soft on the church? Is he? Because I am used more to Dr. C.K. Raju, who goes hammer and tongue against the church.
Yeah.
Well, I think it
He
wasn't it
has.
wasn't soft as although to
No,
his
but see,
credit.
I take heart from the fact that only day before yesterday the news came out that Christianity is now a minor religion, is in minority in the UK,
Minority in the UK. Yeah. Well,
UK and in Wales, where it all began. And therefore, I think it's a good time to make use of that, because why it has happened, that also I can see. Why it is not happening to Islam also is also very clear. Because as people start asking rational questions, then these dogma based religions cannot survive. That's
absolutely.
sunlight is the best disinfectant, and it is the best disinfectant towards this virus of uh, dogma based religion. So
So
I
to
think it's a good
respond to that,
time.
Sanjay, just
It's
briefly,
a,
what
it's a good. What I was wanting to say, that it's a good time to begin the movement.
absolutely, absolutely. But to respond to what you said about this book being soft on the church, one of the things that C- C.K. Raju is a great dear friend of mine. He's actually been soft on the Arab plagiarism and especially on the Islamic side, whereas Bhaskar actually has taken a whole section on that part of the story where this whole myth of this flourishing of Islamic science and Islamic mathematics, why that's a misnomer and why it really was a lot of, firstly, Hindu mathematics, and secondly, it was not really Islamic. So maybe Bhaskar can talk a little bit about that, where the Persian, the ancient Persian work was actually, and the scientists and mathematicians from Persia were really
Yeah.
responsible for that time.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So, yeah, there is, of course, in history we also hear of the so-called Islamic Golden Age, and this Al-Khwarizmi and yeah, all the other people who came after that. So
Yes,
and
that period of
so
Harun Rashid.
yeah,
Yeah.
so the thing is that uh, so so the and what we don't know about, what we don't hear about all this is that the mathematics that is we hear in the so-called Islamic Golden Age, it comes from the mathematics of Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta. So after Sindh in Pakistan, it fell into the hands of the Muslims. So like the Brahmins and the knowledgeable people from India were sent to Arabia for, as envoys, and they would be taking their Sanskrit texts with them, and these Sanskrit texts of Brahmagupta, Aryabhatta, and other mathematicians, and not just mathematics, also other texts, then they would get translated into Persian, Arabic there over there. And then there was also a political aspect here. So the Umayyad Caliphate, it was overthrown by the Abbasid Caliphate in, I think, in 700 CE or so, or sometime before the so-called Islamic Golden Age, and they had taken the help of the Persians, and so
740.
yeah, So they had taken the help of the Persians in overthrowing them, and so they were due to political reasons they had to support the Persians. And now in Persia there was a long tradition of knowledge, because in around after Christianity started in Europe, the so-called pagan Neoplatonic philosophers like Proclus, Theon, and all these other people, Plotinus, they were severely persecuted there by Christianity because they were so-called pagans, and their philosophy was, what in Islam would be called haram, right? So heretic philosophy. So they were persecuted, and they went to Persia, to Iran, what is today Iran, and there with the they st- so this school of knowledge, which is so-called Islamic Golden Age, it also builds up, draws from their sources. Okay, so their sources, and then the Indian mathematicians Brahmagupta, Aryabhatta, their works came here to Persia, and they were translated. Like Al-Khwarizmi is known as the father of algebra, which is actually totally nonsense, because it's actually based in the works of Aryabhatta, Brahmagupta, etc. That this algebra is there. And then one other misleading thing is that it is called the Islamic Golden Age, and it makes one think that Islam had something to do with this. But of course this is not the case, because if it had to do something with Islamic philosophy, then it would have existed all over the world where Islam exists. Why did Islamic mathematics and science flourish only in that geographical region? As I said, it is because of the Persian knowledge tradition from the Neoplatonic philosophers fleeing Christianity and the Hindu texts which came there. This was one thing, and then the second thing is that this political factors which made them support the Persians. And if it had been really connected with Islam, why did it stop after the fall of the this caliphate there, when it was overturned? So basically this political factor was no longer valid, and so and then Islam unfortunately took over the whole region, and then it sort of it finished off the Islamic Golden Age itself, because many of the philosophers of the so-called Islamic Golden Age were actually uh, they had to be very careful about what they express, because their philosophy was based on the philosophy of the Neoplatonic philosophers, which in turn was based on the Vedantic philosophy. So they had to be really careful, and so these are some of the things regarding the Islamic Golden
That
Age.
was also had to do with that internal struggle that happened in the Arabia between the Asherites and the Mutazallis. Of course, that's a different chapter. And I did. I think there's a conversation between me and Dr. Raju where he had to agree to my viewpoint. He rarely does agree to anybody else's. But that was one great accomplishment of mine, where I could prove to him that Sufism is not really what he thought it was. Uh, I think the time to go to the audience questions, and I'll give the first floor to Vibhuti Ji to ask questions to the audience.
Sure. Vladimir Adityanath, thank you. The time calculation based on Indian method and Bharatiya calendar, is it proven to be more accurate than Europe? If yes, how did we go back to using it?
Yeah, I'm unfortunately not very familiar with the Indian calendar. I must admit it upfront. So, uh, so I think maybe one should refer to people who are more knowledgeable in this regard than me. So I'm really sorry I cannot answer this question right now, because I don't know the details about this.
I can refer to one article for people to read. I think CK Raju has done some good work on this, and I also have an article. One of the things that CK Raju points out is that the Indian calendar is more accurate, for instance, for predicting the monsoon. One of the purposes of a calendar is that you understand that seasons fall into particular months, and sometimes we say the rain is late and sometimes the rain is early. But if you're actually following the Indian calendar, the rain is right on time.
Yeah, this is
so
an interesting point. Actually,
so there are many areas in which if we were actually following the Indian calendar, which is way more scientific than the copied and sort of edited and messed up Gregorian calendar that we now follow, which also
We
copies from
we
the
have we have a full episode on the Indian calendar, the superiority of Indian calendar with Dr. C.K. Raju. It's there
absolutely.
on the Jaipur Dialogue, so you could refer to it, Vladimir Adityanath. Next.
In remembrance of Rajiv Dixit ji's great soul. Thank you very much, Vladimir. Jahiliya Infinite knew a little bit of Western philosophy, but was really blown away by Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Between are there any texts which talk about Bharat's ancient India view of ecology? An ecologist here. Any thought?
There's a book by Pankaj Jain, I believe, who has done a lot of work on Hindu ecology and has references. So maybe they should look that up. Uh, Pankaj Jain. He's a professor in US.
Okay.
Next.
Jai Bharat, Jai whatever language it is. Dance
Jai
video के
Punjab.
बाद
Jai Bharat, Jai
Yeah,
Punjab.
जय पंजाब डांस वीडियो के बाद मैथ्स का शो कैसे समझ आएगा anyway stay tuned.
Well, we did a brief, short dancing around for Ravish Kumar's soul. So I think that's what he's referring to.
Dance also has many angles and rhythm and
Well,
mathematics.
Indian dance is completely spiritual.
Absolutely.
It is to make you reach what is called the Anahad Chakra and
That's
then
right.
go beyond.
I think you
So
should read the chapter on computers, prosody, and linguistics in the Imperishable Seed, and there I speak about the prosody and the musical rhythms, and yeah, and the dance is maybe part of the rhythm also, right? So
Yeah, that's right. Omkareshwar Chivari. Is there any way by which our ancient knowledge can be used to have substantial material impact to elevate India globally and decolonize Indian mind?
Sankrant, maybe you can take this.
Um, I think Sanjay ji can speak about this, and Bhaskar can. One of the things that I can point out is I'll give you one example, which might be a little bit off, the charts here. There was a book called Vedic Science and Technology that Garuda had published. This is by an engineering professor. And from a very practical standpoint, he had found these texts where they, for instance, talked about building a solar cell. How do you build a solar cell? There was also a text where he hasn't, which talks about very precise waves that if you combine them, they can be used as weapons. So there's a very piece of information and a lot of knowledge. In fact, Maria Wirth, who wrote Thank You India, who's a German immigrant to India, she mentions that German science really took off after they imported a lot of Sanskrit manuscripts from India. And this is where the whole rise of German scientific mind and German science happens. So, and there are more than 2 million extant manuscripts, Sanskrit manuscripts, more than the rest of the ancient world combined. So I think we've only scratched the surface, and if we really took this seriously, there is so much knowledge to be
There are
obtained.
3 million. There are 3 million documents waiting to be translated, and which are available within Indian libraries, waiting to be translated. 3 million. That was the time when I was actually heading the department which dealt with Sanskrit education in Rajasthan. That is the figure that came to me.
Which is
And
why
there's
it's so
so many
important.
Sanskrit universities have been created, but they do precious little research.
Sanjayji, they will do nothing because, and this is very important to understand. Let's say you know English. That doesn't mean you can read a PhD level book in quantum physics, right? So to say that a Sanskrit department person can understand that text is just is they can't. What we need is we need the physicists, we need the chemical engineering people, and this is we need that is why we need the Sanskrit to be a mandatory language in all education streams in India so that those people with domain knowledge can then go back and read those texts.
Yeah, right. And
may I
one
also?
thing that I can mention to Omkareshwar Tiwari is that we had this session, which is moderated by Sankrant in the Jaipur Dialogues Summit here. And one of the things that was found to be very important, one of the conclusions in that particular session was that In order to decolonize the Indian mind, you have to build pride in Indian science and maths, because that is the tool that has been used to the maximum effect for telling us that we are inferior. And
Absolutely.
that's where this book, Imperishable Seed, is going to be very handy.
Yeah, that's a really very good point. Exactly what I was just about to say. That because otherwise, even our whole identity is something which is imposed from the West, from the colonial times, and we carry on with this identity blindly, believing in the other, what others have told about us, and then with this sort of a mindset, where we have not taken the trouble to know our heritage, how can we do anything of importance or anything original? Yeah.
Yeah. Next.
Rajat. Pythagoras, Socrates, Plato, almost all Greek scientists and philosophers studied math, science, and philosophy in Kondungullar University of Kerala. Aristotle was banned because he was a homosexual and created nuisance. When these guys started stealing and patenting, they were banned. It's a statement, so no question here, but you can give your opinion if you want to.
Yeah, of course, Indians had no system of patenting things, so that
Right.
also came very handy for the Jesuits and for the Westerners to steal things, because they said that okay, na chauraharyam na bhratrabhadyam na rajaharyam na cha bharakari व्यये कृते वर्धते एव नित्यम विद्याधनम सर्वधनम प्रधानम। तो व्यय करने से बढ़ता है, तो विद्या, तो इस चक्कर में they distributed the knowledge freely, and these people, they created the system of patenting knowledge. In fact, we talk about a lot of other depredations, but the biggest exploitation of resources they have done is through patenting knowledge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would also maybe add one more thing here. Like I won't speak about Socrates, Plato, the philosophy. The philosophy, of course, is very similar to Hindu philosophy, as I have in detail explained in the book. But I would speak about Greek geometry. In Greek geometry, people think the Greeks were rationals and the rational people and scientific, whereas the Indians were superstitious and backward and religious. But that is not the case, because even Greek geometry is the origins of it is closely tied up to the Sulba Sutras. Even the Greeks were so-called pagans. They had their own gods, their altars, and they had their altars, religious altars, just like the Sulba Sutras deal with religious altars, the geometry of the religious altars. So, and then there is a very series of articles by the mathematician historian Seidenberg, where he analyzes all this evidence, and he concludes that the Greek geometry is in fact is very close, has originated from something which is very close to the Sulba Sutra geometry. And this is a section in my book which I have discussed in detail about Greek geometry and its Indian origins, and also the history of how it was suppressed by people like Moritz Cantor and other historians. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Next one.
Arijit, when would some of the content make way to texts prescribed by various boards of education? What is the biggest impediment?
It's a vicious cycle. It's the colonized mind that is
That's
the impediment, and
Yes.
unless you decolonize it, what do you do? How do you decolonize it? So it goes around
Well,
in circles.
the impediment is Sanjay ji's biradari. I'm going to,
Yes, yes,
which
yes.
Sanjay ji has left and is very happy to criticize. So, but really,
Yes, I am the
the bureau,
apostate.
yes, you're the apostate from the bureaucratic mind. The bureaucratic mind is the biggest obstacle, and also lack of political will and enough knowledgeable politicians to actually push the bureaucratic mind to act in this regard. I think we're being too
Eh,
timid about it. I think there's enough work now that the textbook can and should be rewritten.
I share all my videos to almost all the groups that I am a member of, except the groups of bureaucrats.
They fall into the category of hum nahi sudhrenge, is it?
So you can draw your own conclusion.
And these are really the children of James Mill. I would call the bureaucrats the children of James Mill. Just like we call some of the 6 so James Mill is really point of writing the history which
We,
all of
we,
these
we
people build
lost a
on. And
couple of sentences from you. Could you repeat it, please?
yeah, I'm saying the bureaucrats can really be called the children of James Mill, because there's this whole stack of scholarship that starts from James Mill History of India, which was mandatory reading for all of the ICS people who are getting recruited. And Bhaskar has done a really good exegesis of some parts of it and how colored and colonized and literally racist. I don't use that term lightly because people just keep using that term all over the place. But but James Mill is very much coming from that mold that white Greeks are obviously better than these dirty Hindus. So that's the evidence he uses in many cases to say why something was discovered in one place versus the other. So that I think is the root of what the bureaucracy was taught for 100 years, and that's a problem.
Next.
How can we make Sanskrit known to everyone? Ashwini Singh is asking.
Well, you have to make it fashionable.
Yeah.
How to make it fashionable?
Hum
That's
api
the
janami.
that's the strategy that we have to adopt. And my next book that is going to be published by Garuda is going to attempt that, to make it fashionable.
Wonderful. Good to know that. Good to know that.
We
Next.
need as many readers as they are writers. So make sure, especially people in who want to support the cause, support Sanjay ji's work, support Bhaskar's work, go out and buy the books. It's really important. We can only keep publishing them if there are enough people buying them.
Quite right.
That's right. Kinjal Patel. Can we come up with Bharatiya Ganit Vigyan with the help of Dr. Raju, Kamble, Sanuji, and others? Stop complaining. Do crowdfunding like Fatwa Alamgiri. Come up with Ganit Vigyan curriculum for schools. The second question was related to that, so I saw it on the screen, so I'm reading it together. So come up with Ganit Vigyan curriculum for schools. That is the remaining part of the thing, yes. Thank you,
Okay.
Kinjal.
At Fathawa Alamgiri crowdfunding was one of the most successful saga. I think the entire Jaipur dialogues history, or not just the Jaipur dialogues history, the entire, I think the Indic crowdfunding history. And we've already put up, it's such a difficult job, I can tell you, because that work, though it has been translated into Urdu, and I'm getting it translated from Urdu to Hindi. But that Urdu, my God, it's full of Arabic and Persian terms, and most of the Urdu walas cannot understand it. So anybody who's translating it has got to know Arabic, has got to know Persian, and has got to know Hindi, minimum. And such people are extremely rare today. Next.
Think Hero 007, 007ization. Okay, hero, he's Bond. Think Indian teachers also have colonial mindset? Of course.
Mostly.
Of course,
You
yeah.
missed out one in Sanskrit.
Yeah, of course, they have a colonial mindset, but the thing is, you can't really blame them because I mean they're just reading from the textbooks, and the whole system is colonial.
There's one question in Sanskrit. Can
Mahendra
we have?
Achars. I'll try to
Yeah.
read it. Sanjay, correct me if I go wrong.
Okay.
भारतीय संख्या पद्धति अरबी हिंदू अरब पद्धति इति उच्यते अपितु पाश्चिमात्ये केवल अरब पद्धति उच्यते भारतीय प्रस्तावज्ञ उपेक्षितः.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
If you cannot make out, I can translate.
I think Bhaskar has probably understood this question.
is it the question probably refers to why is it called Hindu Arabic numbers? Is it that?
Yes,
Yeah. It
and
says that
also
in Arabia it is called Hindu Arab, but in the West it is called only Arab.
Yeah, this is really a problematic thing. In fact, I have also written this in my preface. I was attending a German language class in Berlin, and the teacher was teaching about numbers, the how to speak numbers in German, and he was speaking about Roman numbers, and then he spoke about Arabic numbers, and then I told him that this actually come from India, and he was totally surprised, and I was really surprised in my turn because he's an educated person. He's a German teacher, and with a good amount of education, so that made me realize that even educated people here in the West don't know that. But I yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah.
Next.
Heyram is asking, thank you, Heyram. I noticed communist pseudo intellectuals hate our culture, our own culture, because Hinduism needs practicing, which is harder than reading Abrahamic religious books. Your comments, please.
I don't think that's a problem per se. I mean, we've got hundreds of millions of people all over the world doing yoga, and they're doing namaste, and they're doing the chanting. In fact, the experience that one gets through the practice is much more profound than talking about empty text. In fact, our tradition keeps on saying this. Our tradition keeps saying that you know pothi, what is that that
पोथी पढ़ पढ़ जग मुआ पंडित हुआ न कोय,
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल
भाई आकर प्रेम का पढ़े सो पंडित होए.
पढ़े सो पंडित होए, वही ना. तो पोठी पोठी पढ़ जगमुआ, तो ये पोठी ये पढ़ते रहेंगे, इसकी कोई परेशानी नहीं है. एंड बिकॉज it is not experiential, because it is unnatural, therefore you need to have Sunday school and Friday sermon, so you keep on bashing it into their head, so they don't go anywhere else. Right? But for our tradition is natural. It's the most natural thing in the world. People come to it by themselves. This is why we shouldn't be in fear. We can go with this confidence that the entire world is coming to Sanatan. It has to, because it's the world's tradition.
And I may also add here one thing, that the people, the pseudo intellectuals, communists, hating culture, etc. One factor also is that it's like conformity. People want to conform among their peer groups. So one of the ways of doing this, to appear cool, is that you kind of you disrespect your own culture. At least in India, in the Hindu society, in the Hindu civilization, that's something very unique to India. That you are considered cool if you don't respect your heritage.
That's
It's a kind of
changing.
conformity.
See, people are now started boycotting Bollywood on our calls, so I think it's
That's right.
changing.
No, and that
Absolutely.
Yeah,
conformity part is very important. That's why in the academic circles in the US, your peer group commentary is essential for validation of your own work. So think about it like
exactly.
that. I don't like that. I think if you have done a book, how can anybody else validate that? Why do you need validation from others? The peer group
Exactly.
may
Yeah.
not know anything about it. So
Yeah.
that's I personally don't. We need to debunk a whole lot of uh, the Western ideologies, which essentially governs our thoughts,
Yeah.
and that for that decolonization is a must. And Sanatan, rise of Sanatan is a critical one to take it forward.
Yeah. In fact, this conformity in the academic circles, then that
Yes,
is translated to the common people, and they behave accordingly. So this is in fact a sort of academic imperialism in modern times, uh, which which propagates the power structures in today's world. So yeah, yeah. I mean, I have many examples, but yeah, maybe I'll just some other time.
Yeah. Okay. Next.
Mm.
Kunal Verma, sir, kindly tell about Meru Prastar book. I don't know anything about it. You go ahead.
Yeah, so Meru Prastar is another book, on mathematics, that has been published by Garuda. It's by Chandrahas Halal, and it's the difference is that Bhaskar has gone more into the philosophical foundations and into the historical aspects, where Meru Prasad is just a delightful book that actually goes into so many aspects of Indian mathematics, and so it's just, I think they're very complementary, the two books. The Imperishable Seed is sort of the philosophical and history orientation, where Meru Prasad is kind of the practice of Indian mathematics in many different ways.
Okay.
Next.
Niladri Chakravarti. Why are we unable to attend technological high today? We do not have any university in top 100. Researchers, scholars struggle to get their money and job.
Well, that's as Sankranti would say. He would blame it
मेरा favorite
on, on,
topic आ
on,
गया संजय जी.
on the bureaucracy, and I would
No,
tend
not
to
only
agree with him.
bureaucracy, संजय
The
जी,
only,
अंग्रेजी
I
भाषा
would say that
अंग्रेजी भाषा भी,
establishment.
हाँ, और ऑल्सो अंग्रेजी भाषा भी इसके लिए बहुत हद तक जिम्मेवार है, क्योंकि अगर आप केवल किसी दूसरे की भाषा में पढ़ाई कर रहे हो, उच्च शिक्षा ले रहे हो, तो आपकी जो सृजन शक्ति है वो सीमित रह जाती है. तो आप उस प्रकार की आप रट्टा ही मारते हैं. हमारे अधिकतर जो विद्यार्थी हैं वो रट्टा मार के एग्जाम पास होते हैं. उनसे बात करो कि अभी हमको समझ तो आता नहीं क्या लिखा हुआ है, हम वो रट्टा मार लेते हैं अंग्रेजी को और वो उगल देते हैं एग्जाम में. तो अंग्रेजी और ब्यूरोक्रेसी दोनों ही इसका बहुत बड़े जिम्मेदारी.
I like that. Angrezi or bureaucracy.
अंग्रेजी और अंग्रेजियत.
Angrezi. Yeah, that's great.
Next.
Hey Ram. Oh, he's clarifying his question. I guess my cue was unclear. If I talk about Leelavati Ganitam, so-called intellectuals refuse to even give credit.
Then they are not intellectuals.
That's
I
why
have
they're
a
so-called
favorite.
intellectuals.
If I have a favorite. I should say principle or doctrine. I say that in India, no Indian can call himself an intellectual if he doesn't understand Sanskrit. Period.
Then probably that's the reason why there are very few intellectuals in India. We are not able to
Indeed,
conceptualize our
indeed, that
narrative
is
then.
true.
Absolutely, and that answers the question about the research also, right? Which is that if we keep, है ना, पुरानी लकीर जो अंग्रेजी लकीर है उसको पीटते रहेंगे तो कहाँ से कोई नई रिसर्च आएगी. अगर अगर आज हमारी जो शिक्षा है वो भारतीय उसके जो विज्ञान पद्धति है और जो भारतीय ज्ञान पद्धति है उससे जुड़ जाए तो इतनी नई आविष्कार और इतनी नई शोध हो सकती है जो पूरी दुनिया में संभव नहीं.
Absolutely. Next.
Umakant Gajewar, thank you. How to buy this book in USA? You have the publisher Gadu publication here itself.
Yes. So right now we have not put it up directly for sale in the US, but if you write to international@garudabooks.com, and on the website garudabooks.com, there's also a WhatsApp number. You just send them a message and they'll send you a payment link and they'll ship the book to the US.
That's so simple. And with that, we come to the end of this session. We come to the question hour session, and we come to the end of this session. I have to thank all the viewers for being not just very patient, but being very, very interactive. And you can get all the latest updates from Jaipur Dialogues by joining our social media channels. And of course, we have a very happening website where we publish a lot of material. You could join that website as well for getting very many topical articles. And if you go to the social media channels, the rage on Jaipur Dialogues is the memes and graphics. So those are very popular. Uh, With that, once again, requesting you to please support this channel, to subscribe, and to like and share the video. Thank you very much, Bhaskar ji, Sankrant ji, and Vibhuti ji.
Thank
Jai
you.
Hind, Vande
Thank you.
Mataram.
Jai Hind,
Yeah.
Vande Mataram. Good to meet all of you today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.